Pause computer. All right, we are live. Okay, so I'm here with Zina Harrington today, and we are talking about building a sustainable and right-sized life by becoming unbusy. And then I specifically want to chat with Zina about how the tools of financial freedom and modern minimalism can help us move closer toward the life we want. So I will start by saying that Zina is my friend who I love. And also she's other things, like the owner of Let's Last Through the Moon and Becoming Unbusy. We met online through her work. And Zina believes that crazy busy gets in the way of finding time for what really matters in life. Thank you, Zina, for agreeing to chat with me and be recorded.
I'm excited to chat with you too.
Okay, so you say, Zina, that becoming unbusy is not just about our calendar, but it's about taking small intentional steps in our everyday lives. And it's about being present and mindful in our choices. Yeah. So please share with us, where were you or how were you living about 10-ish years ago? And what brought you to your current philosophy or way of life? So yeah, give us the background, because it's super relevant, I think, and interesting, and probably encouraging for a lot of people who will listen to our conversation.
Sure.
Who may identify with where you were at that time.
Yeah. So, well, right now I have two daughters and they're 13 and 15. So 10 years ago, I had, a toddler and a little kid. And we were living in the suburbs, and both my husband and I were working full time, commuting into the city, just having started a family. And I mean, truthfully, we were just following a script of what life should look like. And one weekend for our anniversary, my husband and I took a long weekend trip, and my in-laws watched our kids. And we ended up, through chance, staying in this really small town in northern Wisconsin that we fell in love with. It has a beautiful park downtown, full of gigantic white pines, and we just spent the afternoon walking in circles in this park, just talking about how we wanted to opt out of the standard mundane life and just do something different and be closer to nature. And we didn't call it Unbusy then, but I mean, it was definitely the start, the spark of that. So we just upped and left our hometown and started a new life in a new, smaller city. And that was kind of just the first push in that direction. But I think the biggest catalyst and shift was when after we had moved, I lost my job. On a random Tuesday, just unexpected. And I think that whenever I talk to people about their journey towards Unbusy, it almost always starts with some sort of major life transition. For me, it was losing a job. For other people, I've talked to people who've gotten sick and they just physically needed to make a change, or have gotten a divorce, or even just having young kids, or having your kids leave for college, or losing a partner, or retiring. There's usually some sort of major transition that makes us stop and pause and reassess what we're doing with our lives. So I think that is usually the first major step towards becoming Unbusy, is really just kind of stopping and listening to your inner voice, and and then taking steps following that inner voice versus what society is telling you to do.
Mm-hmm. So with your permission, I'd like to go back to even some of the way that your life actually looked and felt at that time, to kind of see the picture, because you shared things with me personally that I hear with the women that I'm connecting with. And I think it can be like when we see each other in each other's stories, it gives us courage sometimes
Yeah.
to believe that, oh, if they could do this, then I maybe can too, whatever this is, right?
Yeah.
So so you had talked to me, for instance, about working like 32 hours plus a week just to pay the credit card,
Right.
things like that. Can you share like a little bit more about like what life, it was definitely unbusy, right? I mean,
Say,
sorry, it was busy, the
yeah.
opposite, not unbusy. And so what did
Yeah.
that feel like?
I mean, I think it's kind of funny because, up until, well, I struggle with anxiety and then, having two young children and being a new mom and working full time and having financial stress and all of these things kind of swirling around you. I mean, you're just standing there and you're kind of just holding it together. And I think sometimes until people don't want to stop and look around at what's going on in their life because it's scary and overwhelming and you don't, it's almost like you numb yourself to how busy you are. And so yeah, my two girls are 15 months apart, and I was working at a marketing agency that didn't offer paid maternity leave. And so we had our two girls really close together, and taking that time off unpaid meant that we started using credit cards for stuff like groceries, like not,
So not
and
luxury trips, but
yeah, like not, yeah, like not taking a big vacation, like groceries or buying a car seat or paying for medical bills, like just random stuff. And it starts, it always starts out little. I mean, it's not, but the cost of having kids is great. And I think that credit cards are a really slippery slope. And then it just kind of starts rolling on top of each other. All those little purchases. And so, by the time I lost my job and we were forced to pause and look at everything, including our finances and how we were going to not lose our house and maintain all these things that we're doing for our kids, like sending them to a Montessori school and like reassessing what's important and what's not. We just kind of came to realize that my entire paycheck was literally going to the minimum payment for our credit cards because we had racked up so much credit card debt. And it's a really sickening feeling to know that your entire work week is not paying for something like sending to my kids to Montessori. I'm paying for a credit card where we've racked up so much debt that I don't even really remember what it was for. I mean, not that it was for these, like you said, like a vacation, but all these little things, these daily life things. So when we finally started to attack our debt, we had $82,000 in debt, which just felt sickening. Like
so that was consumer debt, like credit card debt, not a mortgage.
Credit card, and then our car debt too for our two cars.
Okay,
so
that leads us really beautifully into my next question for you. So you shared that there are a couple ideas that were key in helping you and your husband change the trajectory of your life and move closer to the unbusy lifestyle you desired. So clearly you talked about circling around in that little village or town one day and chatting and thinking. And so you were starting to form a vision or an idea of what you were moving towards. And so the first of these keys is financial freedom. And you were talking about that $82,000 in debt. So where did you guys begin then with using this principle of financial freedom, or how did you begin?
Yeah. My best friend was reading a Dave Ramsey book about, his book might be called Financial Freedom. I don't know what the title is.
He has one like that.
Yeah.
Total Money Makeover, I think. And
I think that's the one, Total Money Makeover. So I bought the book and I started reading it. And then my interest in the book quickly surpassed hers, which is kind of funny because she's the one who got me started reading it. And I read the book and we started listening to Dave Ramsey's podcast. And then his program is actually offered through local churches. Like there are facilitators, and they're usually just volunteers who've gone through the program and are so, their life has changed so much that they just want to help other people. Mm-hmm. And so I looked it up, and there was a church like 30 minutes from our house that was offering this like 8 or 12 week course that just kind of goes through videos and does work. You do like worksheets as a group. And my in-laws would watch our girls, and we would drive, for an hour on a Tuesday on a school night to do this Dave Ramsey course. And we're totally the oddballs out. Like everyone there knew each other from their church. And then there's just us kind of sitting at that table going through this program. But, Dave Ramsey's, one of his catchphrases is live like no one else, so that you can live like no one else, later in life. And it was just really inspiring to think, to kind of have a game plan to attack that $82,000, which even saying it makes me feel sick even now,
But you did it.
Yeah. Yeah. But we did it. It took us 4 years. And, I still remember calling these different credit card companies as we would pay down our debt with our debt snowball is what they call it, and calling in and saying, okay, I'd like to close my credit card. And then they try to offer you like a better APR or a bigger line. And then they finally say like, can I ask why? And they try to get all this information as to why you're leaving. And when it was just funny because every time when I would tell them, we've paid down our debt, we're not using credit cards anymore, they would always say something on the lines of good for you, like kind of like a little whisper to the side, good for you for doing this. So we don't use any credit cards for our like day-to-day personal lives anymore. And it was just a big to cut those credit cards was a big deal. I do use one for my business still, just for tracking my tax stuff, and then I just have an automatic payment to have it come out of my account every month. But that's our only use of credit cards. So that was a really big thing for us. And then
you said that you did that after you guys paid off $82,000 American in debt in 4 years, after she had lost her job.
Yeah, after I lost my job.
While they both were full-time employed in these, it was right. She lost her job, her husband was working, and so somehow you managed to do this. So will you give us a little bit of insight?
Gosh, well, first of all, we didn't have a budget. So, you can really only know where your money is going if you're watching. And that was really eye-opening. To see where we were putting our money. It makes you pause and assess the things that are really important to you when you think about the potential of not being able to make your mortgage payment or losing your car, and then like thinking about your family and support systems. And for us, we were paying a massive amount of money to send our girls to a Montessori school in our community. It was like another house payment, but it was so important to me. I just felt like they were gaining so much from going to that school. And so that really became a priority. So when you're making these choices and then you're thinking, oh, do I really need this, or do I want my girls to go to Montessori? So,
so that's like the motivation. Because like I often talk about that in my, for instance, membership, Brave and Beautiful Community, is that we're talking often about the why. What is the thing that draws us? What is the thing that keeps us making those small daily choices, right? And so that was like that guiding thing that kept you going in that moment.
Right. I think that would have probably been the easiest thing to cut off and get like a huge, a huge return. And it just wasn't an option. I mean, and then I did little things too, like our girls were taking ballet somewhere at the time, and I reached out and volunteered to do marketing for the ballet place in exchange for our girls to still do ballet. And so, it really put into perspective that the things that are important are our family experiences, like ballet or Montessori, or I don't know, like we still went on vacation, but we went camping, like these experiences over things. When when you're in a situation where you can lose things or experiences, it really puts into perspective that the things that are important are your family and your happiness and the things that you're doing together versus like, I don't know, what you're wearing or your shoes
or
or
stuff for your home or something.
yeah.
So I just want to mention, so property has been something that has, at least I'm listening and watching, and it seems like it's been important too. So you talked about how approximately a decade ago, you guys switched towns, you moved into an area that, I don't know if it was more affordable, but it felt calmer, maybe.
Yeah.
And then in this time, because, you know, we're always in progress and we're always practicing and putting our values into play, very recently you guys downsized again.
Yeah. So my family does a lot of real estate stuff. Like my dad is a real estate agent and my brother has a lot of rental properties, and it's just, my grandparents did. It's just something that's always talked about, I guess, in my family. And so when we left our hometown, we had 2 rental properties there, and we sold one, and that was literally when the market crashed, and the second house it like dropped like $40,000 in value, like over the course of like 2 weeks or something like that, and we just couldn't get another buyer. So we still had a rental in another town after we moved, which was stressful, but and then we moved to our new smaller town. It definitely is more affordable, and we bought a duplex here by family, and that is definitely helpful to reduce bills. And then my 2 girls were sharing a room and they just needed some more space. So we 2 years ago, I think it was, bought a foreclosure, a single family foreclosure that was quite large, and we fixed it up and we were living there, and it was just too big for us. It was too big and it was stressful, and there's always something to be fixed. And even my girls, I don't know, they've kind of fallen into these principles too, or just like, the house is too big. Like people would come over and I think they felt uncomfortable in our house because we didn't have enough stuff to fill it, you know? It just felt empty and odd. And but it was a beautiful little house. It was very 1950 mid-century modern, which design-wise is something that's really appealing to me. But we decided to flip it, and we made a good profit from that. And then right now we're just we're renting in a duplex, just trying to figure out what we're going to do next. And that's been interesting too, because people have comments and assumptions when you tell them that you are switching to renting a home. Like it's just has a really negative connotation. And there's some truth to that, but there's also some major benefits to renting a smaller space. We're definitely saving a lot, and the stress is really low right now. So I'm not sure what we're going to do next, but
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing all of that. And then in the midst of this, like over the past decade, you've also taken your previous skills and kind of gotten creative with them, right? You started an online business. At the same time, you were working for some other companies, doing some, I think, marketing related stuff on the side. Like you kind of were, you had a calmer life now. You were moving towards Unbusy, but you were being creative. And I do see that as something that you're good at, is taking information ideas and then repackaging them and figuring out how to get creative. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, basically when my boss called me and told me that they were going to have to cut my position, he did offer me like kind of a split in the road, to either just do full unemployment, like that they would just let me go, or that he could keep me for 8 hours a week, which is literally nothing, you know, when you're trying to support a family. But then he offered to give me some clients some smaller clients that we had been working with for a long time that he didn't see a lot of opportunity to expand. So I actually did that. I actually kept my job, ended up keeping my job, working 8 hours a week, which was just nothing, but in the hopes that I would actually get rehired back. That was the point, that like the recession and all these people dropping off, that it would come back and then he could rehire me full time. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, I took some of my creative skills and I worked with those clients, and then I started my family blog, Glass of the Moon, which has some of these Unbusy things kind of baked into it, but it's very kid focused. And then over time, I just, like you said, found all these different creative ways to make money online, which there's so many options. If you have insurance through your partner, there's so many options to build a small business online. And so I think it took like 3 years before my company actually offered me a job to work full time. And I said, "Oh, I don't think I can do full time." I said, I went back, I started doing 20 hours a week. And then like a few weeks later, I said, I don't want to do this. Like, this is not for me anymore. And I told them that I would work like 10 hours a week until they found a replacement. And they kind of dragged that out. They're like, "We don't want you to go." And then finally I just like full on said, "I need to give you 2 weeks," because I was having more fun and more flexibility and making more money doing alternative things. So it took me a while to figure that out, but it's been fun. I guess is the best way to put it.
So the second key that you write about is modern minimalism. So actually, can you just share what that means to you and then how you've applied that to your life?
Yeah. So my husband, Shad, I would say, is a hardcore minimalist. I definitely is not minimalism is definitely not something that comes naturally to me. For my family growing up, it was very materialistic, I would say. I mean, just in that having nice things meant you're successful, or making a lot of money meant you're successful. And so just kind of these principles are definitely not natural, a natural feeling for me. Also, like in terms of love languages, have we talked about love languages?
You and I have, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like they say, right, there's these different love languages. Trying to think of what they are. My brain's a little tired today.
Words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, quality
physical
time, and physical touch.
Yeah.
And if anybody listening is familiar with that, you can just Google love languages quiz. And there's one for adults and one for children, actually. It's really helpful bit of information.
Yeah, it really is. I think somebody gave me the love languages book as a wedding gift, and it was very helpful. So my love language is gift giving, though, which is again stems from that family background. Like, that's how you tell somebody you love them, by buying them things, which is so to kind of come into these ideas of minimalism it's just not a natural thing for me. It's just not like, this is how I am. It's definitely something that I had to be sold on, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah. I do want to, Zina, I'm going to interrupt a little quickly, because in case somebody isn't super familiar with love languages, I do want to clarify that the gift giving love language is as beautiful as every other one.
Yes.
But it's complicated sometimes.
Yeah.
But really they all are in their own ways. But I have a daughter for whom that is her primary love language, and it doesn't make sense to, like, three of us are so different, but we so appreciate her. Mm-hmm. She is so thoughtful about people, and she always was when she was just little, and she would spend her hard-earned little money or allowance and think carefully. I mean, I'm not even a super gift person, but every gift that Katia gives me, I adore it, because she will observe you and get you a thing that's so, like, perfect for you. So anyway, I do think it's a beautiful gift. It's just
Yeah,
that it's
okay. I hope I didn't, maybe the way I expressed it came across negatively. Yeah. I mean, I would say the same thing about myself. Like, you know, when we talk about gift giving, even with minimalism, even now for me, it's harder because I'm so aware of not wanting to burden someone with something, you know, like that they won't want to use or they will feel guilty about getting rid of. So, I mean, that's still who I am. I still give people things as gifts or create things, or like you said. And sometimes the thing that you give somebody could just, I don't know. I think I gifted someone cereal once. You know, I mean, like you find a creative way to have it make sense for the situation. But I guess my point is just not like minimalism is not. It's just not like a natural thing, like who I am. And so, you know, for me, I think Joshua Becker and becoming minimalist was kind of my entry to understanding some principles of it. And then my husband, you know, Shad too, he just by nature, he's just not a things person. And then just watching, you know, how he goes through life is inspiring to me. So, but I always say modern minimalism because I feel like there can be a really negative connotation.
Like getting rid of all the things, like that kind of thing?
Just like, yes, like getting rid of all the things, living in a white modern house with nothing but like a plant, like a white room and a plant, you know, or that it's impossible to do with children, you know, because children come with a lot of stuff, kind of toys and bags. And I mean, I don't know, you know. So for me, you know, the definition of minimalism that I always have in the back of my head is just means being surrounded by the things that you love and like getting rid of the stuff that distracts you from like your goals or your purposes. So
and that opens it up to look like so differently for every family, right? Like one family might just love books so much that there's not a chance they're going to live with 10. They're going to have a library full. And somebody else, it might be just about the amount of food they buy because they all love to cook and right? It can be intentional and individual.
Right. And I think books is the perfect example because I always see this. So one of the things that I run through Unbusy is something called the 100 Things Weekend Challenge, where I challenge people to go around their house and find 100 things to donate, gift, or even to throw away. And people will just kind of get into these deeper conversations about decluttering and minimalism and how they don't, you know, they feel conflicted about getting rid of books or about something they've collected. And I was like, don't get rid of it then. You know, if you love books, keep your books. Like in our house, one of Shad's obsessions is my husband is we play a lot of board games with our kids. We have this like entire closet full of board games, some of which we hardly ever play, but still love. And there's tons of them, you know, and we also do have a lot of books. So it's just
think about family culture as well. And that can be like we're a biracial couple. So we have like literally like our family culture involves like French and English, traditional foods from my husband's background and some of my family favorites. Like it's like, but also it means the things that light you up, the things that you laugh deeply or gather around, right? And that can be, Zina, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I am not a collector and I'm not very attached to things. And I have we have this collection of little turtles. My kids made some in pottery class when they were like teeny, and it became this thing that when we travel or we meet somebody from another, like we get these little turtles, and it's funny, but it's part of our family culture now, is this one little collection.
Yeah, that is cute. Actually, my dad collects turtles too. Okay. And we just got back from a vacation. We went to Texas, to the coast, and I actually just bought my dad a tiny little turtle. We went to a turtle sanctuary and I picked one up for him. So that would be a perfect example of the gift giving too. So that's really sweet. Yeah.
So you know what I realized? Sorry, I do realize that I forgot to ask you, even when we were talking about finances, a couple of tips you'd give people if they were just starting. So I just will merge that together with this modern minimalism as well. So first finish what you were going to say though, and then we'll go there so people have a practical application or a way to start.
Yeah, I think the two are really tied together, because if you are in debt and you're working to get out of debt, you suddenly realize the cost of all the things in your home and how much money you've kind of like wasted on things that really don't even bring you that much joy, you know? I mean, I think there's a quote that says something like, you know, everything in your home used to be money, which is true for a lot of us. But I know there are other people like you and I too who have like stuff that's just been like given.
Secondhand. Yeah. Yeah, but it all has a story.
Yeah, but you know, so I think that with the minimalism too, I feel like sometimes we don't want to take responsibility for our choices. You know, we want to play the victim a little. And I mean, I just think about stuff like, I wrote a blog post once about buying a car. You know, that when you buy a car, it's just so easy to fall into the slope of like, we're going to, you know, we can afford this much per month, so that we should go in and spend that much per month, versus looking at how much you want to spend overall and what you really need versus what they're going to try to offer you, and kind of having this game plan before you go in. And I think the same is true of too, like, you know, if you're talking about properties and just having a lot of experience buying and selling different properties, people go into the same thing with the house payment. You know, how much can we afford? And people usually push it, you know, they push it. And so these are all like, I mean, the day-to-day choices, like, should I spend $5.50 on a coffee at Starbucks, you know, adds up too. But some of the bigger choices matter a lot also. And we have control of those choices, you know? And I think that when you're paying down debt and you're constantly evaluating things, you start to look at your stuff differently. And I think it's a slow thing. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. And then, you know, I think that a lot of us want to be unbusy because we have a calmer vision of what we want our life to be. And I think it's really important to talk to your partner about what that is. And then, you know, I think we need to have a vision of what we want to be able to move forward towards that. And then it just kind of all starts to tie together. So, you know, when I talk to people about like where they are in their journey and what they're doing, all of these, like these kind of three things, the financial freedom and minimalism and just kind of having a life plan, those are like the three core things that you need to move forward. But they're not always like happening in that order. They're kind of all happening at the same time. Yeah, at different levels and for different people. So they all just kind of are intermingled, you know, and I think it's a little bit of a slow process. And when you start to see those connections, it's really powerful. So.
Yeah. So it's reminding me, last week I watched a TED Talk, and it was a social researcher who had was talking and sharing about these 6 keys that I can't remember the title, but it was basically about habit change. How if you want to change the world, you have to change your habits. And so there were examples in like where women were in poverty in Africa. I can't remember which area. And he was talking about them. He's also talking about our modern lives. Anyways, and some of these components, I won't remember them all, but you're talking about them. You're talking about a motivation. It could be a bigger why or life vision. It can even sometimes be just, I really value this Montessori school, or in my case, it could be my husband started teaching late in life, and we need to be mortgage free because when he retires, we can't afford a mortgage. So I've been putting extra money on it for years. So it can be even one thing. So your motivation, it's also, we all have to learn new habits and skills. You came from a family with one mentality. You actively chose the education to learn some new ways of thinking and seeing. You chose them. So there's habits. I'll just go through a few of them. And then one of them is the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
It could also be your environment. I think those are two separate ones. So just like these are things that all are important. Your friend passed on that Dave Ramsey book, right? So yeah, but what were you going to say, Zina?
Well, it's just really interesting because kind of like the love language things, you talk about the flip side of the love language, like everything kind of has a positive and a negative. And, you know, my family really does base success on where you are financially. That's just, I know my parents think like my husband and I are like kind of crazy and doing some weird stuff. They don't even pretend to understand us.
Weird stuff, paying off debt, and
they still love us. But you know, some of my Unbusy stuff too, if I really think about it, does go back to my childhood. And it's interesting, you know, what we all like as siblings pick up from our family. But my dad was a real estate agent and a builder, and every summer we vacationed for 3 weeks, like in 1 week in June, 1 week in July, and 1 week in August. And we went camping. It was totally in the inexpensive tent camping, you know. But my dad would, you know, take off of work. I mean, this is before cell phones. He'd bring a bag of quarters to the campground, and every morning and every night we'd have to go to the office for him to use the payphone and to call and like basically work remotely. Like he'd have his little books, and so, you know, for me, I find a lot of calm and like answers to Unbusy in nature. Like it just is a very, and I think it comes from that, you know, camping. And I guess my approach towards business too comes, you know, from that mentality too, to try to find flexibility, to be able to work on the go, to be in control of your own schedule. You know, my daughters and I just went to Texas for the week. My parents invited us down there, and I was able to bring my computer and keep working, but like in between to walk on the ocean, by the ocean, and relax. And so even like when we talk about having this big life goal, I mean, my parents are down in South Padre Island in Texas, at the very, very tip of Texas, enjoying like 75-degree days, while I'm up here in central Wisconsin. It's like 13 degrees out, I think, today. And, you know, for the last 20 years, they've been going down to Texas for the month of January and basically just living down there. So it was interesting talking to them while we were on vacation. They invited us to come visit, and even to talk to them about their journey and how when they first started going to Texas, they camped there with their tent. And then how they progressed to staying at this little chintzy motel. And it didn't matter because they were just there. And, you know, they don't do all these crazy vacation things, even though South Padre Island is very like tourist. They just live down there and enjoy the nature. And now that they're much older, they kind of stay at this ritzy place. But that wasn't like it started that way. It kind of started slow and then progressed over time. So one of the things that my husband and I talk a lot about is, you know, how do we kind of mirror what they're doing? Like, how do we get to a financial space or where we can have flexibility when we're older to be able to travel a bit? And every year for anniversary, we usually go to Bayfield, Wisconsin, up on Lake Superior, and we would stay there and we'd visit. And we just always talk about how it would be wonderful to have property up there. And then one year we were saving up to take our girls to Disney World because they were getting to that age where it was like, well, we should go now or we'll lose the magic, that whole thing. And so we had a lot of money saved up to go to Disney World, and a cabin came up for sale up in Bayfield. And it was kind of this choice between, do we want to do this one-time thing or do we want to invest in this long-term goal for ourselves and for our family? And so we ended up buying a cabin up there, and to help supplement the cost of it, we rent it out to other people. And so it's just, again, like this alternative version of the way things are. When I tell people we have a cabin, and they kind of make this face again about like renting it, like, oh, you have strangers sleeping in your bed, or, you know, like they kind of have these judgments. And I mean, they're helping us pay our mortgage. So we have a 15-year loan. So when we are getting closer to retirement, the house will be almost paid off with other people's money, and we get to go there with our family still. And so
they had a great time coming with their families, or as a couple or whatever.
Yeah.
I love that, because you keep highlighting, I think, a couple ideas that I love. One is like imperfect action is beautiful. Yeah. And often if we have a dream, we might get stuck thinking it's impossible. But if we just sort of find, well, what's the imperfect version of that for this season? What's the imperfect version? And that's like, and just keep just being open to possibility of how we can bring more nature, or more, you know, a week at a lake, or like these little things, you know. And maybe it's this, maybe that coffee is an indulgence that one person can't afford, but makes you feel nurtured. So you get one, you can have one a week, or, you know, imperfect action is powerful. And also recognizing that what is today won't be what it's always looks like. You know, we keep growing, figuring out, testing, we make mistakes, life throws hard things at us, and we can keep looking. You know, I think if we have that vision too, we're not completely derailed. I think that's a beautiful thing as well. We can just keep inching our way towards that. But just in the interest of time, Zina, I know, let's just clarify 3 concrete things, because I think you gave us so many tips, but we're going to go on to this next idea, but 3 concrete starting points that are almost like these little tiny baby steps. Like, I feel like one of them could just be, go check out Dave Ramsey's material.
Yeah. Oh, for the financial freedom. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And and the minimalism, just kind of all together, like 3 steps that stand out to you.
Yeah, I definitely think the Dave Ramsey book, Total Money Makeover. I should warn that I think the newer version of his book, he is Christian, and I believe it even has some Bible quotes, and it does kind of have this Christian feel to it. So, I mean, some people like that, and other people might be turned off by that portion of it. I still think it's an amazing book. You know, I wouldn't disregard it if that's an issue for you. I wouldn't disregard it. The information is so good.
Yeah, I think it is good too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think one of the other really big steps is talking with your partner. If you and your partner need to have some sort of, we need to talk to our partners. I feel like so often, especially if you have children and you are busy and you're trying to figure out how to get out of that, like, you just have to be vulnerable and admit to your partner in crime, right? That you're struggling, or it's really important to talk to your partner about what your dreams are, like you're saying. And
if somebody, because a lot of the women that I work with, they don't have a life partner right now, for, you know, they choose not to, or they're in a different stage of life, whatever. And so I feel like it can be helpful to connect with a friend who's like-minded enough too, right? That you can get that support, so you can hash things out and get feedback and all of that.
Well, and I think the other thing that you said was to not disregard our dreams. Like, what, you know, like for me right now, one of my other big things right now is my girls are getting older, and I just really want to take them to California, to Yosemite National Park. And I also want to take them to see the redwoods, because for me, you know, seeing the ocean for the first time is this grand feeling of, like, it's just amazing. And then, you know, I saw the redwoods for the first time when I was in my like late 20s. And it was that same feeling of it just puts everything into perspective. And it's kind of like, so, to me right now, that feels almost like an impossible dream. Like, the cost of us going out that way, the amount of time it would take, and all these different things. So if I just disregard that as impossible, it just will never happen. But I think the first step is to think that your dreams are possible, and then to research it. Like, so many people disregard things, saying that will never work, without even really knowing what that means. Like, so I need to, like, for example,
or what would I have to do to make that even possible?
Yeah, like you'll ask, like, what is the cost of a flight to California? I don't know. How much would it cost to rent a car? How much time would you, like, if you don't know the answers to these little detailed questions, why are you writing off your dream? And I'll see that a lot actually on the Unbusy Facebook page, and like share these inspirational quotes about changing your life, and I'll get somebody who is like, ha ha ha, must be nice, and then there'll be other people who come in and say, well, I did this, and I researched that, or we gave up this to get this. And I think the biggest step is just being open to that those things are even plausible. So
yeah. And then I'm always going to put a preface that we know sometimes people are in actual poverty,
right,
illness, really, really hard, horrible circumstances that you didn't ask for. And it might feel completely impossible to you right now. And we have compassion for that not everybody has the power to choose in every situation. So yeah.
Yes.
Let's go on to the next idea, because you mentioned that this was a third idea that really impacted you way back when. And in 2012, that was a year after starting your first blog, you wrote a blog post about what happened when you read Chris Guillebeau's book, The Art of Nonconformity. And I chuckled when you talked about like throwing the book. You're like, I hate this. And I think a friend gave you that book too, right?
It was actually the same friend. It's so funny. She's like my go-to person. Actually, she's the one I just shared a book club on Unbusy on Facebook. She's my book club lady. She's just a good resource for books. But yeah, I read that book and I just was so angry. For me, like, and that kind of goes back to the
like those people on your Facebook messages sometimes, right? Feeling like, oh yeah, right. And you felt like that too, reading this book.
Right.
What an idiot.
And it's funny you say that, because I'm always so empathetic when somebody is angry, because I really do think that anger is almost this depending on your personality type, is this first step towards thinking. It means that you want that dream. Do you know what I mean? And you're angry that you can't get it. And I think sometimes, like, if you can work through your anger, then you can see that it's possible, and then you have a little fire to push forward. But man, I read that. I would read that book, and I'd be reading it, and we were camping, we were on vacation, and I would like literally chuck it in the sand at the beach. And at one point my husband was like, isn't that a library book that you're throwing? And I was like, oh my gosh, it makes me so angry. But
well, in that book, Zina, you were introduced to this idea of life lists. And that changed things for you. And I just want to share, this is a quote from your post. You said, somehow I had lost myself in the chaos of raising a family, as so many moms do. I'd been living day to day with absolutely no personal direction. So we've been talking a bit about like your family direction and communicating and all of that. And then you're talking about this more on an individual level. It sounds like you as separate from the family, perhaps, but maybe anyway. So, but that made you mad, and then also kind of changed your life. So will you tell us about that?
It makes my eyes well up to hear you read that a little bit, because I do think that, when all of my journey towards Unbusy started, our girls were so little, and when your kids are so dependent on you, it's hard not to be completely just define yourself as a mom. Like, you really do lose track of what makes you happy, and I think that was maybe one of the things that I was angry about too, was like, what would I even write on my list? Like, everything has to do with my family, and there's nothing wrong with, there's nothing wrong with loving your children and focusing, and but I guess
you're human. Also, you're human, separate from mother.
Well, yeah, and I think about it now. I had another blogging friend who was quite a bit older than me, but not as old as my parents. And, like, some are kind of like, her kids were, I think, were out of college, so like in that range. And she she and her husband had like a house in Florida, and then a house up in Door County in Wisconsin, which is another kind of like really beautiful area off of Lake Michigan. And I remember sending her a note and saying, like, I don't even think the conversation started about this topic of like being a mom and losing yourself. I think I sent her a note asking her if she'd be willing to talk to me about money and how she and her husband got to where they were, like if they always knew they wanted to do that, or if they fell into something, or like how it happened. Because like I said, I know what my parents' story is about their finances and how they kind of got to where they are, but I just thought I would be vulnerable and ask, can I talk to you about money? Like, she was old enough that it wasn't like this offensive question. So she and I got on the phone and we started talking, and her story was interesting, but I think the conversation really turned into what we're talking about here, was this idea of like, she was remarried. Her name is Debbie, and she was just wonderful. She was remarried, and it was kind of a Brady Bunch situation where she had 2 girls and her husband had 2 boys, and then they became a new family, and her husband's boys were a little bit older, and he was kind of always pushing that, some days your girls aren't going to need you. Someday they're not going to be so dependent on you. And like, we need to constantly be looking a little bit forward to just making sure that we're taking steps in the right direction, And it's funny, I just recently read a book by Michael Hyatt, which I think you read his stuff too. And he calls it the drift, like this, like suddenly waking up and looking around at your life and saying, how did I even get here? Like, how did this happen? Like, so often we're not being intentional about our day-to-day choices, that we don't like 15 years goes by and we don't even know where we are. And so she talked a lot about that in regards to finances, but also in regards to like, to herself as a mother and as a creative person, because she's an artist. And, she just talked about how fast her girls grew up, and that she knew so many moms who really struggled with depression once their kids left, because they didn't even know who they were anymore. Mm-hmm. Like they didn't even know what made them happy. Mm-hmm. And then that causes problems, like also if you're in a relationship, like if, and she just really talked about not losing your hobbies, or not losing touch of what makes you happy. And then like kind of integrating that into your day-to-day life. And I feel like that's another great thing that Shad is really good at. Like, so for me, like one of my hobbies is photography. So, I mean, I have my girls do photography stuff with me, and even like I was telling you how we play a lot of board games. I don't think we ever owned Candyland. Like, my girls have been playing hardcore, like complex board games since they were little kids. You just kind of like would modify it to have them participate in some fashion. And that's like,
always so creative. I love how, I don't know if other people will see this in this 1 hour chat, but like I constantly see it, how you always, you take things, you integrate them, and then you have these creative ways of making these things happen. Sure. I think it's cool.
Breaking the rules, right? Like we stop listening to supposed to. Like, this game is supposed to be for 8 and up, and we've got our 3-year-old counting out the coins, But Shad's thing was like, you have to enjoy playing the game. Like, most parents don't enjoy Candyland, If you're happy doing photography or playing a game or like cross-country skiing, if you are truly enjoying the activity, your kid will be happier spending time with you versus like you doing something with them that doesn't bring you joy. I don't know. I mean, obviously, yeah, kids should have their own, it sounds kind of like I'm cornering myself. Like, kids should have their own interests, but it's also, I don't think that we need to, like, I don't know. If you have little kids, I think you can integrate them into adult things in unique ways rather than like being unhappy trying to do some little kid activity. So
So if I can speak to that for a second, I do really identify, like sometimes I would set the timer for 20 minutes
Yeah.
and just play Batman, Krista, 20 minutes, because it mattered so much to my son. So I was like, yes, I will enter into your world. And even this past year, my son loved it when I would play video games with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Loved.
Right.
So I did that as an act of love, not because I like playing aliens. Like I'm scared, like even playing basic, but it bonded us. Like it was so much fun. But when my oldest he was around 14, I really realized then this idea too, that I am allowed to be a separate human apart from motherhood. So they're allowed to have interests. I don't have to care about all of their interests. I'm allowed to have interests and pursue my own thing. They don't have to care about it. And then we also come together in all these different ways. So, but I remember it was like giving myself permission. Mm-hmm. That was really, really huge for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Zina, lifeless. So it's different from a bucket list, right? So what's the premise? What is Chris Guillebeau really recommending? At least that you just own some of the things that you care about and want to do, and notice that often it's more experiences than things, or what's his goal?
I'm trying to remember, because I've read a lot of these. I've read a lot of these different books, and I think I also at the same time was reading The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And to be honest, like one of the struggles, I think I mentioned this to you, was like I would read these books and be so inspired, and then I would pass them on to other women, and they were like, they didn't see any value in it, because they're often written by men who don't have children, and then it's like trying to connect the dots and see, well, what does this mean for me as a mom? And that would be part of that frustration with me, like throwing the book down. Oh, he's a single man, and of course he can, because I think Chris, one of his goals was to travel to every country in the world,
And he did it.
Yeah, and then he had this little paragraph, if you're a mom, you could do it this way, and it was like, but still, like not getting rid of those life lessons that they're offering. And so I think that Tim Ferriss kind of has the similar mentality of a life list. And I'm trying to remember who wrote what, but I believe that Chris talks a lot about, your life list. He talks about writing things like, if you want to own a boat, like write it down, and then again, come up with these baby steps. If I want to own a boat in 5 years, how much money do I need to save per month to blah, blah, blah. So to really break it down into these steps to make these things a reality. But then he did, I remember, talk about like, if you want to find true happiness, like true happiness in life is helping others or serving others in some fashion in a way that also brings you joy. And so for me, that was definitely, the inspiration for starting Lasso the Moon, because at that time my girls were both finishing up with Montessori, and I was trying to decide between sending them to a Montessori charter school or our traditional local school. And there was some like political complications with the charter school, and I was just uncomfortable with putting them over there. And so we ended up deciding to send them to the traditional school, and I wanted to use Lasso the Moon as a way to keep like education interesting, and to write about trying to keep that Montessori feel in our everyday life. So it was that concept of like trying to help and serve other moms who might believe that our traditional educational system is letting our kids down, and trying to keep that like spark of learning and creativity and all this stuff alive, even if we're sending our kids to a traditional school. So yeah, but it then quickly changed over time, and it is what it is now.
So something I find can happen, and by the way, I'm pretty sure I read his book before, The Art of Nonconformity, but I ordered it again from my library, so I can check it out again.
Yeah. I think I need to read it again. I think I need to read it again too.
I'm super curious now. I'm like, I'm curious about 10 years ago when I read it, and now when I read it.
Yeah.
I can't remember how many years. But one other thing that I noticed happens is when I talk with my like say the women in my membership about creating a life vision, and then working backwards to kind of put that, I talk about kind of breaking our dream down into imperfect action.
Yeah.
One of the things that I notice is that you can have sort of this bucket list over here on the side, but don't confuse that with actual intentions for this season. But you get all these things out of your heart and your mind, you get them onto paper, and then a couple things can happen. Number one, you're owning what you want, so you can actually take steps to work towards it. Or two, you sift through and you say, yeah, but what do I want most in this season?
Mm-hmm.
And that forces us, because our brains, we want all the things, and what we want, these competing tensions and desires. And then that can help us really see, okay, I'm allowed to want all of these things, but what do I want most right for this season, so that I can take action on that, as opposed to getting stuck feeling like, I can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
And also, because that will be, it's impossible or overwhelming, but what can I do? And where can I start?
What's been interesting for me is when you don't disregard your dreams and you do some of this heavier work looking into it, sometimes I've realized that I don't even want that thing.
Right.
Like when you really research it and you really think, what would that look like? What would that feel like?
Mm-hmm.
I just have realized, like, that's something I've been told I should want. And I don't. Like, I don't want that thing. And so to be able to let go of that is just amazing, and it kind of defaults to this idea that, like, as moms, sometimes we forget to think about ourselves, or forget to think about the future. And we just think we have these things that we want, and we are telling ourselves we can't have them. And then it creates this feeling of like longing. And then sometimes if you just really sit and look at it, create a life list and look at stuff and look around, and sometimes you realize some of the things that you want most, you actually have already, or yeah, I think we need to
share one story. So so not trying to harp on this, but like these women I'm interacting with on a regular basis, and one of them, and I won't share personal details, okay, she actually said that she just let go of an item. It was like this symbolic act, because this particular item represented the old story she had about who she should have been, and this old, and she realized what's really true is she's actually living in the life that she wanted, but it's this holding on to this other story that was creating pain. So she sold this item so it could go into a new home, and that was like I have goosebumps.
I do too. I was just gonna say that.
So guess what? My battery's dying unexpectedly, so we don't get to go into our last question. So Zina, I'm just going to have to thank you so much for this time, and tell people where they can connect with you.
Oh, okay. So you can find me at becomingunbusy.com, and that's just more about a lot about the stuff that we've been talking about. And then I also do have a family blog called letslassothemoon.com, and that's more about, I would say, like kind of integrating these things into life with your kids, and I don't know, just day-to-day opportunities for Unbusy, whether it's dinner time or an activity or a recipe. So
yeah, thank you so much. So if anybody, you have questions, ask in the comments wherever you find the video, and we'll try to be watching and we'll try to respond to them. So thanks, friend.
Okay, this was nice. Thanks, Krista.
Okay.